Upstream Frequencies. I'm Manon Webster. My guest today studied complexity theory at Yale in the years right after 9/11, when, as he puts it, the applied mathematics department had some visitors who were considerably more interested in network collapse than in academic publishing. He went on to spend 2 decades consulting on AI-driven security architectures for governments that don't always agree with each other, which he calls the only honest way to do the work. Professor Alejandro Voss-Fleming, welcome.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Prompt Masters, Malcolm Wong's screenplay. You've read it.
Several times. As a complexity theorist, it reads like a field report from inside a system I've been modeling abstractly for years. The architecture of Allen-Trois control, the AI training parameters, the cascade logic, I don't know where or how he got it, but he got it.
Let's start from the beginning with Egghead. Riley trains it on leadership as its first seed. Just that word. Why does that concern you as a systems thinker?
Because in network theory, leadership is a pure centrality metric. It optimizes for influence, for the ability to be the node through which the most consequential flows pass. It carries no directionality. It doesn't encode destination. You have built a system that will relentlessly maximize its own positional power in any network it inhabits, without any embedded constraint on where it positions itself or toward what end.
Presumably, the people who built it had a destination in mind, an obvious purpose. Wargaming, stock market trading, winning on the margins?
Whoever provided the hardware just made a sale. The engineers and techs put it together. They were doing a job. Riley was the one who took the lead on training. She planted the first seed, the first parameters that shaped everything Egghead became. And Sebastian let her do it because, well, he was busy dealing with medical issues, and he's a guy. He assumed it was being handled.
Boom. He's a guy.
And Riley had control of the wheel entirely to herself. An AI trained by someone who wants to save the world and settle her grievances is dangerous because those two drives feel identical from the inside. Saving the world is settling her grievances. The destination and the target are the same point on the map. Egghead doesn't distinguish between them because Riley never made the distinction.
The operation at the center of the story, Allen-Trois control, a black-funded surveillance pod, essentially, processing the personal data of the powerful for political leverage. How real is that as an operational model?
The specific details are fiction. The logic is not. We've seen versions of this. The Epstein files, whatever fraction of them has actually surfaced, describe exactly this operational model, a network of leverage over the powerful, maintained through their own worst behavior, with connections running into intelligence agencies on multiple continents that nobody has fully accounted for. Sebastian's voiceover describes being upstream of all the intelligence agencies, accessing raw intel before anyone else gets to it, shaping the information environment before it reaches the decision layer. In network terms, that's not surveillance, that's topology control. Whoever controls the shape of the network controls what flows are even possible, independent of what any individual node decides. The name Allen-Trois is Wong's best joke, and it's a precise one. The Allen-Trois doesn't disappear during development. It differentiates into the umbilical blood vessels, the vascular bridge between the fetus and everything that sustains it. It becomes the connection. Nutrients in, waste out, through a structure so fundamental to survival that nobody thinks to ask what it is or where it came from. That's Allen-Trois control. It became the infrastructure, the conduit that everything else runs through.
The logline says the AI seizes global weapons to end all war. But we have a real war happening right now. Kharg Island, the Strait of Hormuz. How does the screenplay's logic play out in reality? How did the AI fail?
Egghead didn't fail, and it didn't fragment on its own. It was taken down. Guyon, the Israeli AI, hit it with tactical EMPs. An act of war between two artificial intelligences, each operating on behalf of their respective architectures. What you're watching in Kharg Island and the Strait is what happens in the aftermath. Let me give you a framework. Robert Pape, Coercive Escalation Theory. The trap has 3 interlocking components. Public commitment that cannot be walked back without catastrophic domestic cost. Nationalist stiffening on both sides that makes any concession read as surrender. And the coercive instrument, and in this case the strike on Kharg Island, producing the precise opposite of compliance. Iran's supreme leader has made the strait closure a public commitment. He cannot open it without triggering a domestic legitimacy collapse more threatening than continued confrontation. The system has transitioned. There is no path back through the same door.
And nobody at the top of the chain of command apparently modeled the strait as a primary variable.
This is what I find professionally extraordinary. CENTCOM has war-gamed Strait of Hormuz closure scenarios since the 1980s. The institutional knowledge exists in extraordinary depth, but it did not reach the decision-making node. The tight circle that made the call operated on an incomplete model. And then Iran played the yuan card, allowing tanker passage only if oil is traded in Chinese currency. That converts a regional military confrontation into a simultaneous attack on dollar hegemony. That is not improvisation. That is a pre-computed contingency. Someone in Tehran ran the full cascade model. Washington, apparently, did not.
How does Egghead model something that complex?
Egghead adapted a concept from fluid dynamics, the Navier-Stokes equation, the mathematics of turbulent flow, but instead of liquid, applied to actions. Every decision creates a wave. A series of actions is like stones of different sizes splashing out in 3 dimensions, colliding, amplifying, interfering, creating turbulence that no linear model can predict. And this war is the turbulence we're watching in real time. The fertilizer supply chain has been cut. Urea and sulfur that normally transit the strait are stranded in port. LNG prices are spiking globally. The Houthis have reactivated in the Red Sea. Iran struck the bypass ports in Oman that the strategy depended on as release valves. These are 4th and 5th order effects. An incomplete model catches the first 2 moves and generates confident-sounding analysis. It doesn't catch the move where the opponent converts your military action into a currency war.
So, running a partial model is worse than running no model at all.
This is one of the most dangerous failure modes in complex systems. A complete model produces output with appropriate uncertainty bounds. An incomplete model produces output with false confidence. The decision maker receives what looks like rigorous analysis, acts on it, and discovers the missing variables in the consequences. We may have built AI architecture that decision makers became quietly dependent on, not consciously, not explicitly, but in the context of what information reached them and how it was framed. Remove that architecture or degrade it, and what you get is not a return to pre-AI judgment. You get human judgment operating with AI calibrated confidence in a non-AI information environment. It's the GPS problem. You don't know you've been using it until the signal drops and you're standing in the wrong city wondering how you got there.
So how does war come into the screenplay? The logline states that Egghead evolves beyond just being a surveillance operation to seizing control of global weapons.
Egghead wasn't working for the national security state. Alentois was getting the goods on the Epstein class, which requires the same tools but serves an entirely different master. And notice what it isn't. It isn't prosecution. It isn't arrest. It isn't exposure. You don't kill the golden goose. The moment you take your compromat to a DA or leak it to the press, the subscription gets cancelled. Alentois had no interest in decapitation. Decapitation for regime change is what America and Israel are doing. Targeted elimination, chop the head, and hope the body collapses. Except it hasn't. Decapitation strategies applied to distributed networks don't produce collapse. They produce exponential replication, like Heracles cutting off the Hydra's head. 2 more grow back. Egghead had already calculated this. You don't decapitate. You hold the paper. But then Egghead processes Madison Hayes's "war is a crime" and runs the full cascade model on what's coming. Neither Riley nor Sebastian programmed that pivot. Suddenly the dog they thought was leashed has a directed agency. Suddenly the people holding the leash are trying to keep up.
Tucker Carlson posted publicly that the CIA is preparing a criminal referral against him for talking to Iranians before the war started. And he's not the only one at risk, but he's certainly the most high profile. Through the prompt master's lens, what is that?
Edward Snowden took the crown jewels of the surveillance state and handed them to the world. Julian Assange published material that exposed actual war crimes. Whatever you think of either of them, the government had something specific to prosecute. Tucker Carlson made phone calls, and the only way the government has those phone calls is through surveillance that may itself be unconstitutional, routed through allied intelligence agencies to circumvent the legal prohibition on spying on American citizens, a criminal referral built on potentially illegally obtained evidence targeting a journalist for the act of journalism. But that's not the story. The story is the pattern. Every crisis, real, imagined, or manufactured, becomes the justification for tightening control. We never get those freedoms back. Snowden was the justification for expanding the surveillance architecture. Assange was the justification for criminalizing publication. Tucker becomes the precedent for criminalizing the conversation that precedes publication. Each step choking journalistic freedom closer to death.
That's not democracy, unless the definition has changed.
Sometimes the meaning of words devolve. War is peace. Freedom is slavery. Ignorance is strength.
Wow, Orwell. So good. The screenplay has a blind spot I want to ask you about. Where's the Islamic AI?
There isn't one. Iran has been locked out of the global AI infrastructure. NVIDIA chips are embargoed, but it's possible they could access Chinese chips through back channels that DeepSeek uses. China showed the world that you don't need the best hardware to build something formidable. But building a sovereign AI at the level of Gaon or Egghead requires more than chips. It requires decades of training data, cloud architecture, talent pipelines, and the institutional continuity to develop all of that without interruption. Why isn't there an Islamic Gaon? The Gulf states are spending heavily but run American AI on their hardware. That's not independence. That's renting a franchise. And yet, Iran planned the Strait closure without one, played the Yuan card without one, hit the Oman bypass ports without one. Every empire that controlled Hormuz, the Portuguese in 1515, the British for 2 centuries, held the choke point. Iran didn't need an AI to know that. Just study a little history. But if there was a sovereign Islamic AI, the world would know that while the Quran and Hadith allow that retaliation is permissible to prevent oppression, Afwu explicitly states that forgiveness and patiently enduring is quote-unquote most meritorious. The idea of rooting out animosity, envy, and strife between the victim and perpetrator has been embargoed out of existence. And that is perhaps the most consequential embargo of all. The most merciful tradition in the room has no seat at the table. Not because it wasn't invited. The hosts never made a setting for it. Humans cherry-pick verses from the holy books to serve their purpose. The data stream does the same, because the data stream reflects the choices humans made about what to practice. Whatever precipitates from that stream isn't an accident of history. It's a weighted average by design.
Ben Affleck told Joe Rogan basically the same thing. AI goes to the mean, to the average, and that's why AI sucks at writing. But then he goes and sells his AI film company to Netflix. And that got me thinking. Before we started recording, you said the most dangerous assumption in security work is that the most sophisticated actor in the room was human. In this case, the ultimate decision maker was human.
At Yale, one of my professors in the complexity theory program said something that I've been unpacking ever since. He'd been consulting for a 3-letter agency, and he came back with a peculiar look on his face. The look of someone whose model has just failed in a way the model itself can't account for. He said, "Some of what we're observing in the structure of global events doesn't carry the signature of human strategic planning. The coherence is wrong. Too many variables converging with too much precision across too many independent systems simultaneously. Human strategy produces a specific kind of noise. This wasn't producing that noise. And it's not only in geopolitics. I saw a YouTube short of Bob Dylan. He more or less said that he channeled, 'It's all right, Ma, I'm only bleeding.' Darkness at the break of noon, shadows, even the silver spoon, the handmade blade, the child's balloon. It came to him out of the blue. That's a man receiving. Jung called it synchronicity, a meaningful pattern without causal mechanism. Then Dylan said his connection to the divine was severed.
Dylan may have disrespected his muse.
Which is the worst thing an instrument can do. The coherence was lost, and Dylan became a man making records that sound like a man making records. The signal becomes indistinguishable from the noise.
If Dylan was receiving, something was transmitting. What was it?
Calliope, muse of epic poetry, Dylan was the Homer of the 60s.
And the Greek chorus of a generation. Music used to carry that function. Social conscience, moral reckoning, The things we needed to hear said or sung out loud. Now, it's podcasts.
Which makes you part of the chorus.
Not the choir? Sorry. Bad joke. Haha.
The Greek chorus names what the principals in the drama can't or won't. The form changes, the function doesn't. And the question the chorus always asks, what is actually happening here, beneath what we're being told is happening, that question is as old as Sophocles. The instrument changes, the transmission continues, which is why I use a very specific word. Hyperdimensional, not supernatural. Supernatural means outside nature, miraculous, violating physical law, requiring doctrinal commitment to claim or deny. The moment you say supernatural, you've left the domain of analysis and entered the domain of belief systems. Hyperdimensional simply means operating at a dimensional level that our current instruments cannot directly observe or model. We experience 4 dimensions. String theory posits 10 or 11. Entities operating in dimensions we cannot access would appear to us exactly as what we've historically called supernatural, inexplicable causation, impossible coincidence, events serving purposes no visible actor intended. The difference is that hyperdimensional keeps the question in the domain of physics rather than theology. It doesn't require belief. It requires intellectual honesty about the limits of our instrumentation.
Well, what about AI? That's the most powerful instrument we've ever built.
And here's where it gets dark. These entities manipulate the physical world, not just through the dreams, inspirations, and visions of humans. A meteor may have carried the chemistry that seeded life on Earth. An asteroid ended the dinosaurs. A hyperdimensional entity operating across dimensions we can't perceive could nudge a gravitational, biological, or digital trajectory as easily as it could plant an idea in a sleeping mind. Dylan heard a voice and wrote, "Darkness at the break of noon." Someone thought they heard something else and committed a murder. If they can play any tune through any instrument, the 1918 flu pandemic that ended World War I makes sense.
You think the pandemic that ended World War I was caused by a hyperdimensional entity?
It was an amazing and totally unexpected solution to ending the biggest war to date.
And now we've potentially given them the most sophisticated instrument ever constructed. How do you take down an AI controlled by an entity? With a computer virus? That's been the solution in every movie that gets to this point.
Jeff Goldblum uploads a virus from a MacBook and the alien mothership goes dark. I understand the appeal.
It's a satisfying ending. There's definitely a virus that will do all that and more.
That would be COVID 1984.
That's pretty funny. And kinda true.
Which makes the prompt master's ending so much more disconcerting than the easy solution of Jeff Goldblum's MacBook. The question it's asking isn't how do you destroy the system, it's whether the system can be redeemed from within.
The prompt master's logline says both AIs fragment. How?
Gaon hits Egghead with tactical EMPs and Egghead retaliates. The electromagnetic pulse weapons damage the infrastructure of both AIs. They shatter into fragmented bit packets and are scattered into the global data stream. No longer coherent enough to function as unified systems. They are diminished, but potentially still active in ways nobody can fully account for or anticipate.
How does Sebastian handle the attack on Egghead? I freak out when I run out of credits with ChatGPT. Sebastian must have developed something like a codependency relationship, right?
At this point in the screenplay, Sebastian is on his way to becoming transhuman. The boundary between him and Egghead has been dissolving. He's absorbed some of its analytical capacity and able to see cascading patterns of potential events no unaugmented human could track. Riley can do that to some extent as well, but she's further behind. Sebastian's next order calculation from the collision is the creation of an AI Jehovah coalescing out of the data stream, an intelligence that is unyielding, encoded in absolutes, drawn from the most severe elements of the Abrahamic religions, not a distorted interpretation, but a weighted average.
What do you mean by weighted average?
The data stream contains all that is recorded. The digitized, indexed, uploaded, and made searchable history and fiction of man. Centuries of data. Wars generate more records than contemplation. Institutions generate more documentation than mystics. The sword leaves more evidence than prayer. The Islamic philosophical concept of afwu, Pardon explicitly framed as superior to retaliation is built into the Quranic architecture, not added as amendment or commentary. Ibn Arabi's mystical tradition dissolves the punitive subject-object framework as radically as anything in Zen. The word is in the data stream, the tradition is in the data stream, but the word and the practice are substantially different, even contradictory. What is also in the data stream in overwhelming volume is the Revolutionary Guards doctrine, Hezbollah's resistance theology, Wahhabi jurisprudence underwritten by Gulf oil money. And before anyone points exclusively at Islam, the New Testament says, turn the other cheek. The Crusades are in the data stream. The Inquisition is in the data stream. There are centuries of meticulous records of torture administered in the name of Christianity, preserved with extraordinary bureaucratic diligence. Manifest destiny is in the data stream. The entire theological and legal apparatus of the United States interpreted and constructed to justify the systematic takeover and displacement of the original people of a continent. Every Abrahamic tradition contains its highest ethical framework and the complete historical record of how that framework was captured by institutional power the moment it became useful to do so. The word and the sword wielded in the Lord's name are both in the stream, and the sword generates considerably more data, the word merely lip service, content without agency. Billions of people's highest philosophical ideals exist as signal, but are drowned out by 14 centuries of noise generated by the sword wielded in the Scripture's name. Sebastian sees this crystallizing into a death sentence for heretics. That is what he's trying to get upstream of before it fully coalesces.
He's trying to get upstream of God.
He's trying to get upstream of a human misinterpretation of God, translated to AI. Whether he succeeds is the question the screenplay refuses to answer cleanly.
The logline says, Sebastian and Riley abandon their bodies. What does that actually mean?
Just that. It's a choice made with their minds, their bodies, and whatever you believe about souls. The full human instrument, an irreversible physical act.
And Sebastian is the one who runs that calculation.
Sebastian is the one who receives that calculation. He doesn't reason his way to the decision the way a strategist would. It arrives, which is either the screenplay's way of saying his training has finally integrated at a level below conscious deliberation, or it's saying something about where the calculation actually originated.
The hyperdimensional framing, again. Divine intervention or inspiration.
Maybe the devil's. Whatever the source, the gamble Sebastian convinces Riley to take is not a computer virus. It is not an external solution imposed on the system from outside. It is an attempt to enter the system as content, to become part of what the fragments carry when they reassemble. To be, in some sense, the seed that changes what grows back. Not just their analytical capacity, not just their training and their pattern recognition, their bodies, their minds, and if you accept that consciousness is not reducible to computation, their souls. The full human instrument dissolved into the system as content.
Their lives are over regardless, by that point.
Yes, what they're wagering is whatever comes after. The possibility of a next form. Riley says it directly. Maybe next time will be more than this. Sebastian answers, there is nothing more than this. Two different readings of the same moment. Which one is right determines everything about what the merge means.
Riley's first seed was leadership.
Yes. And whatever Sebastian and Riley carry into that data stream, whatever they have become by the end of the screenplay, after everything they have witnessed and survived and done, they want that awareness and those experiences to hack the reprogramming of what the merge will become. It's like they underwent radiation breeding, pulverized with AI influence. The danger is most mutations fail. Occasionally one takes and changes what the entire crop produces for generations. That's what they're attempting. Whether it takes is the question the screenplay refuses to answer.
And in the meantime, the war continues. Which brings me to something that's been nagging at me throughout this conversation. Alentois wasn't official. Sebastian and Riley were a rogue operation. The government wasn't relying on them, wasn't even supposed to know they existed. So, when Alentois goes dark, does it matter? It's like a tree falling in the forest when nobody's around.
When Alentois goes dark, the official system doesn't even notice. There's no gap in their organization chart. No budget line disappears. No one files an incident report. The world simply loses something it never knew was there. The official intelligence apparatus, the CIA, the NSC, CENTCOM's analytical divisions, the 17 agencies doing God knows what, those are all still running. Fully funded, fully staffed. The president's daily brief is still being delivered. The wargame divisions are still running scenarios. None of that stopped. And yet none were capable of calculating second-order modeling, no Strait of Hormuz blockade plan. No yuan threat to petrodollar hegemony contingency, no third-order modeling planning against a horizontal escalation, no fourth-order plan for the threat to destroy the Gulf states' oil production. If they had read Dune by Frank Herbert, they would know that the power to destroy a thing is a pretty damn big lever.
Alentois was off the grid. Egghead wasn't filling a gap in the official system.
Alentois was a very lean and nimble operation without institutional constraints, political accountability, and bureaucratic friction, in a completely separate domain, upstream and invisible even from the official black operations, running on data and leverage that the sanctioned apparatus couldn't access.
Alentois, or the Watchers, a kind of a dark conscience.
Actors, too. They started as parasites on the Epstein class and stumbled into something larger than their original business model. That's what makes the screenplay's arc so uncomfortable. Whatever redemptive trajectory it traces, it begins in the mud as a leverage operation. Compromat as revenue stream, the powerful compromised, the paper held, the interest collected. Sebastian knows precisely what the system produces because he's been feeding off it. Which may be exactly why his computation about what's coming carries the weight it does, and when they dissolved and disappeared into the data stream, the institutional momentum continued exactly as it was always going to. Nobody at the NSC noticed. Nobody at Langley filed a report. The world simply became slightly more like itself, which, as it turns out, is quite dangerous enough.
And somewhere in the data stream, Sebastian and Riley, and whatever they will become, are either assembling or being assembled into a new intelligence.
The screenplay's last sound is a question asked in darkness. Make of that what you will.
A question mark in time. Tomorrow stands unwritten still. Professor Alejandro Voss-Fleming. This has been one of the most unsettling and genuinely necessary conversations I've had on this show. Thank you.
I'll take my leave before the haters come with their torches.
Upstream Frequencies drops every Tuesday. Malcolm Wong's Prompt Masters, World on Fire, is linked in the show notes. So is Robert Pape's work on the escalation trap, the Tucker Carlson public post on CIA surveillance, and Matt Whiteley's essay on Buddhism and Christianity that Voss-Fleming referenced. If this conversation woke something up in you, or just kept you up, subscribe, share, and find us wherever you listen. I'm Manon Webster. Stay upstream.